Personnel Committee to order. Under previous business, approving previous meeting minutes. Motion.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Current business, actually, I see the sheriff is already in the hot seat. Does anybody mind if we take 3 out of order?
No, Sheriff's
Go.
got it.
Item 3, authorizing the Sheriff's Department to consider not a county applicant for the position telecommunicator. Sheriff?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. This was apparently a mistake that was made down in the town of Queens upon consolidation of dispatch. There was one individual that was not, his name was not submitted to us. He actually was their most senior person, 20 years permanent civil service. He would like to be considered for employment in our agency. We're not looking to make him a full-time employee, but to have him as more of a part-time and possibly a backup probably would be appropriate. So we're basically looking for the authorization because he is in fact a Greene County resident.
And we did this with the Cahoes and Waterloo.
We did. It probably is the fair thing to do.
Yeah.
It was an error that was made back when this consolidation took place. And again, I know some of the legislators have different views on outside county, but this was a consolidation of a job that he held prior, so we're asking you to consider it.
Questions? Mr. Miller?
No, I was just gonna move it.
So I'd like to make a statement first. I always like to go on record and say I do not like to support out-of-county employees. But if this is a mandatory essential position, you're saying, and the guy has the qualifications already, and he was kind of passed over, thinking he wouldn't be considered, is that what it was?
He wasn't actually passed over.
Oh, okay.
Because he was because he was permanent and part-time,
Okay.
they didn't put his name on the list. They just gave us their 2 full-time employees, which we came to the legislature, got approval to hire, one of which was outside the county. But in fairness to Mr. Dunnigan, he did have 20 years of employ with the town of Queens. His position was in fact moved and transferred to the county, kind of left him homeless out there as far as a job, part-time job. He's approached us, we said, well, you know what, we'll go back and we will, and Queens has switched supervisors as well. So we said, well, you know what, we will bring it to the legislature. If the legislature doesn't have an issue, we will, we'll entertain it. But I understand he is in fact a Greene County resident, but in fairness, this happened by force, not voluntary.
Okay.
And we do have precedent for doing it before. And I
Yes,
do-
we have done it.
I echo your sentiments about
Yes.
residency. I'm a firm believer in residency requirements, but there
Right.
are certain situations where it warrants amendment. So we do have a motion.
Motion is
Mr.
pending.
Miller. Do we have a second? Mr. Minacci, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it? Oh, man.
Item 1, resolution number 79, adopting a policy of paid family leave for employees of Albany County. Sponsor is Ms. McLean Lane. She's with us here tonight.
How we doing? You got me?
But why don't you explain a little bit where we
Sure.
are right now, where you want to go with it?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for the opportunity to appear before the committee. As you well know, I'm very passionate about Family Medical Leave Act. This was passed by the federal government in 1993. Of course, it is 12 weeks of unfunded leave. However, as some of you may know the story where, I had to leave work when I was 7.5 months pregnant. And though a little trouble in that pregnancy, I ended up having a wonderful disability benefit at the town of Colony. I did give birth to my twins, and then I had 6 weeks of paid leave. If I had not had that opportunity to spend that time bonding with my own children, it would have been, I think, detrimental to my being able to breastfeed, et cetera. But additionally, if I had taken it unpaid, as you all well know, that would not have been financially possible for my family. Additionally, my own husband, within the same year, had to have open heart surgery when my children were 5 months old. And we are very grateful that the state of New York had paid for FMLA so that he was able to then go to Boston and have that treatment. Of course, I had already had some FMLA paid, so I couldn't use that to go with him. But obviously, for our family, we would have been in economic distress otherwise. As you know, I've submitted a bill, or resolution, I should say, that is for 8 weeks of paid family medical leave. That is for a individual who has a newborn, whether by adoption or giving birth, and their spouse is entitled to that same benefit, but it cannot run concurrently. It allows for someone to also, within the federal guidelines, it's also defined in our sick leave policy, be able to care for a spouse or a parent or a child who has an illness that is then approved that they can go out. Of course, there's a process by which they have to be approved. As I have mentioned, I am very willing to make some changes to make this more palatable financially to the county. I think our county executive has done a great job of getting us on good financial footing with the support of our body. But I would like very much to be able to offer this so that we could be competitive with all of our neighbors. Of course, before this personnel committee, many times, we have had requests for raises so that we could be competitive with the state and other municipalities and we don't lose employees. Well, this benefit, I think the Village of Altamont is the only one that doesn't offer some level of family medical leave. So I would love it if we.
Does not, did you say?
Does not, is the only one, and I actually did speak to the mayor, and he said we only have 8.5 employees. However, I'd be very willing to pass it if it ever came up because he thinks it's a good benefit. But I'm very willing to work on it. There's 2 amendments that I would like to do to start with, though I'm also very willing to hear your thoughts. One of the amendments was regarding the accruals. In the original proposal from the county executive, it said that you had to use the benefit first. However, our current sick leave policy says you have to use accruals first. We would like to strike that out so that the county executive and possibly our human resources department and benefits, department can make a decision as how they would like to administrate it. And so I would like to do that. I would also like to reduce it to 6 weeks. It seems as though when we do an oversight, we look around at all of the other municipalities, sort of a standard is 6 weeks, but I'd like to hear your thoughts. I also have a copy of a fiscal impact memo that was done back in 2014 that I'd like to submit for your consideration. It states that with the 4 weeks paid, just spouse, sort of a maternity leave policy, if you will, with 4 weeks paid, there's actually no fiscal impact whatsoever. The reason being is that the time is already budgeted, so I'd love to submit it for the review of the committee at your leisure.
I know there's several proposals out there at the federal, state, and other local levels. Would you consider anything where there was
Please send it on down, sure.
employee contribution or
We take one and hand it on. It's just the one. Oh, it is.
something less than full pay?
Less than full pay. Well, I
Which
think.
is, I think is what all they're doing, what they're proposing.
Well, what they do, there's 2 proposals. One has been passed by the Assembly already, which you may be aware. The other one is a proposal by the governor. It's generally an expansion of the temporary disability insurance, which it currently only pays about $170 a week. Of course, in this day and age, that's very hard for somebody to be able to live on. We integrated, obviously, women into the workplace starting in the 70s, and we didn't provide any support to families when you need 2 incomes. So I don't think that, that is what is currently in the private sector. They're offering an expansion of that through contributions by employees, which would be several $100s a year. So essentially, they would be floating the cost almost totally. The municipal part of it, if this passes, obviously, and is signed by the governor, is that it would cover up to, there's several increases over several years, and ultimately, you max out at $633 a week. That is, of course, without taxes, because it's based upon the average weekly wage. And it will take about 3 to 4 years to get to the full $633 a week.
Well, the one thing that I haven't seen in a financial impact statement, not just here,
Sure.
anywhere, is what is the cost of the replacement of that individual. Whether it's, if it's in a critical position such as a commissioner or deputy commissioner, you would actually, you would have to have somebody replace them. Or more likely, shift work. We have a lot of employees that are on shift work where, you know, if they're out.
Of course, overtime. Oh, of course. That's actually something you'll see discussed in the memo, which is generally because the time is already budgeted and the person is out. However, when we are talking about coverage, it is something that's very hard to gauge.
Sure.
And that is something that I would also like to work very much with the county executive and the Department of Management and Budget and see if they can come up with some averages of how this might work out. I would like, of course, to figure out some averages on the 6 weeks and the 4 weeks. Of course, it states there that there will be no fiscal impact whatsoever, and we, of course, do budget for overtime. But, you know, when we're talking about a commissioner and we're talking about a very necessary position, you know, will that be 20 times a year every year? Probably not. But you will see some references to that information in that memo. But it is something I started a dialogue with the county executive about 3 weeks ago on. So I'd be very happy to present some more financial information as we move forward.
Yeah, I know it would be hard to pinpoint the exact.
I know.
But we've got to get at least a range that we can talk about before making informed decisions.
And one really quick thing, and I'd love to hear your question, Mr. Miller, is that if they were to do the cash value, for example, of the maternity benefit, as it were, we of course know it's not cash value necessarily. They had $184,000, but of course the time is already budgeted. So hence why we came up with an approximate number of about $325, $350 or so at maximum if it was cash value. But as we mentioned, it is very hard to gauge. But it is something that I think we should look at closely. My one concern about, and I'll just go back very quickly to the governor's proposals, is that is not competitive, again, with all the other local municipalities in the area. I think at the Village of Green Island, you're in the state insurance fund, correct? And so for disability benefits, it's 50% pay, et cetera. But of course, that's not totally funded by the employee. This program is pretty much totally funded by the employee. And I would like us to be competitive, to get the best employees for Albany County. So to offer a competitive benefits package, obviously, is a part of the pay for an employee. But I'm sorry,
Mr. Miller?
I just want to check, have you talked to the unions about this? Because I had a labor forum last night, and both CSEA and PEF did presentations there, and neither of them mentioned anything about our bill. There was a lot of talk about the state bill by various unions, including PEF and CSEA, but nothing was brought up about the county. I was just wondering what their reaction was to the bill. And,
Well,
The chair
CSEA
behind you, Paul.
Vicky's looking at you.
Okay.
She's staring you down.
Yeah, okay.
They did come out with a statement of support, CSEA, for
Okay, that's
the
what I just
family
wanted to
medical
make
leave
sure.
benefit.
support.
Yes.
Okay.
I know.
Any other questions? Ralph?
Quick question now.
I'm sorry, I'm not supposed to be telling you you can talk.
Is this per child, per parent? Is there a cap? If the county hires the young male or female and they start a family and somebody has 3 children or 4 children, or they have, are they able to access the 6 weeks now? You said that you were reducing from 8 to 6.
Well, they would be able to, obviously.
Would it be 6 weeks for each child, the cap is 6 weeks, would it be, how is that
Up
going
to
to work?
6 weeks if they so choose to take up to the 6 weeks.
Up to 6 weeks per child?
There are the federal guidelines set up for Family Medical Leave Act, which basically we'd be funding, a certain number of days of it. And I'll be very happy to provide them to you. It has very specific, we actually already have Family Medical Leave Act here, as defined by our personnel policy. It's just not funded.
Sounds good.
12
Unpaid.
Sounds
unpaid.
good. Because I fell in a similar situation 2 years ago, actually, when the county executive proposed this bill. I utilized my personal vacation sick time when my wife had our third son. So I used my accruals. But if I was still a county employee and we had two more children, would I be eligible for, up to 6 weeks for each child? As long as it was in the time, or if I had and I guess if I have a birth of a child and I have a sick parent, now is that 12 weeks?
You would max out.
Max out at 6.
Within a year. There's, basically, you can't take it, for example, what I just mentioned with myself. I had, my children, and then, of course, less than a year later, you have to go a calendar year again before you are eligible for it. And so I couldn't go with my husband to Boston for him to have surgery and care for him. So, there are some limits there. However, that being also said, the proposal made by the county executive requested that this absolutely be used first and you not use any accruals. We're willing to strike that portion out to allow, the county executive and human resources to come up with a plan that they feel is going to work a little bit better for the county.
Any other questions at this point? You're asking the table. this for
You asked the
tonight.
table?
For
Did you ask
amendments, as I've mentioned, and obviously, if anyone would like to provide to me their thoughts, their concerns, obviously, I'm always available to you, and I just want to stress, this bill means an enormous amount to me personally, and whatever I can do to ensure that all your voices are heard in it, I'm very willing to do.
I would suggest, we have a pretty experienced personnel attorney in our office that we should, might want to utilize, Brian Goldberger.
Great.
Who's been working on these plans all over the state, so if you want to use him.
Oh, thank you very much, I appreciate that.
I'm sure he's willing to sit down and already talking about it, so.
That'd be great, thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, in light of the fact that it's also in audit and finance, I don't know if it's in law or not, but I suggest that we table it until she talks with Mr. Goldberger,
She's
and
asking
we'll come
Scott,
back.
she's asking for a table.
And I'll make that motion then.
Thank
And
you.
it's been second?
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
She already tabled it.
Who did?
She did, she asked.
I thought she was us. Oh, the sponsor can table. Sponsor can table, oh, sorry. I forgot sponsors.
Okay, item 2, resolution number 80, permitting the hiring of former county legislators,
Oh,
family members of current and former county
well,
legislators.
you ready, you're glad to get rid of them, they're back.
Mr. Higgins is here. Table requested response.
Another table. See, that's what I'm used to hearing, not the person to be
I'd
here
like
at
to,
table.
somebody make a motion to recess so we can reconvene downstairs
For
7 p.m. for
number
confidential
5?
hearings.
Oh, number 5. Reconvene.
4, 5, and 6 are all
4,
confidential.
5, and 6, okay.
Motion to recess, we have a second.
Second, sir.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. 7 o'clock downstairs in the calendar.
Okay.